Massive welcome to the Citizen Science Academy launch. My name is Suraya and I'm a citizen social scientist and a social work student, and I'll be one of your hosts for this session. I come from a background of criminal justice and social activism for young Londoners, working in research, children's social care and community engagement. And I was a citizen social scientist for the Good Life Euston project, and I worked on the Camden prosperity model with my fellow Camden citizens.
Hi everyone, I'm Lorraine Owusu. I currently work at Tag Agency, a creative agency that supports young people and helps to transform their lives through culture, community and storytelling. I'm also a citizen science from Gascoigne Estate in Hackney and works with the East London cohort to research what a good life meant to the people and research what barriers existed to prevent this. So in this session, we'll put forward a series of questions to our guests, as well as open the floor to explore the importance of why citizen science matters and what potential impacts it may have on organisations, local communities, and creating opportunities for other people. So now I'd like to welcome our guests for the Q&A. We have Dame Professor Henrietta Moore, the founder and director of the Institute for Global Prosperity at UCL. We also have Mayor Rokhsana Fiaz, OBE, who was elected and has served as the Mayor of Newham since May 2018. She has been a councillor for Custom House Ward since 2014 and the CEO of an international UNESCO-supported charity which promotes interfaith and global citizenship across the world. In 2009, she was honoured with the Officer of the Order of the British Empire for services to Black and minority communities in the UK.
We're also very glad to welcome our very own Councillor Georgia Gould, leader of Camden Council. Councillor Gould was appointed in May 2017 and has served as a councillor for the Kentish Town Ward of Camden since 2010. Georgia studied at Camden School for Girls and has lived in the borough for most of her adult life. But before becoming a leader at Camden Council, she held cabinet roles responsible for young people, economic growth and adult social care. And Georgia has a particular interest in youth politics and has published a book called Wasted: How Misunderstanding Young Britain Threatens Our Future. So a massive thank you for our speakers for joining us today. So we'll now transition to question time.
Georgia's first.
Thanks. I guess to get us all started, we'd like to know why you think it's important for citizens to have a voice in policy decisions.
I think this event has already just shown the richness and creativity and ideas that citizens bring to decision making. In a borough like Camden, where over 100 languages are spoken, where people have so many diverse lived experiences, it's just impossible for local government to understand that mix of lived experience and perspective. So if we're going to have good policy, we need citizens to be shaping the policies that impact them. We've seen that in Camden in so many different ways, but one example I often give is within our children's social services. One of the most kind of difficult areas of the council's power is the way that they can the ability they have to try and keep louder. Nobody's ever told me that I'm too quiet before, so this is a real first. The ability they have to remove children from families to keep them safe, and that is kind of the hardest edge of state power. But even in that space, we found that working alongside families who've had that experience, making sure that they shape services, that they are advocates for other parents, has completely transformed how we deliver social services. And similarly, there's not a kind of policy area from housing to rubbish collection where the voices of citizens doesn't improve and enhance the decisions that we make. I think the second area is that we are seeing a kind of decline in trust in politics and political decision making, and where citizens are coming together and leading and shaping policy, the difference that makes in people's sense of agency, their sense of being part of the community. When we've had citizens' assembly, I've heard people say this is the first time they've actually felt like a citizen, they felt like they had a voice, and I think that is incredibly powerful. And then I think there's something about how it brings in voices that we would never have heard. So Suraya, when you were doing the Good Life Euston work, you found that people would speak to you, just wouldn't come to the council because there was a trust in your position in the community and a different kind of openness. And I think that if we are really serious about hearing different voices, then we need to invest in that civic leadership.
Yes, we want to add this to what we support decisions and works in.
Hi everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me so much. I'm just building on the amazing sort of contributions that Georgia's already made. I'm going to touch on the latter point in terms of the pivotal moment that we're at as a country and the corrosive impact that not doing politics well has had in our democracy here in the UK, but also you see it manifest in so many varied and dangerous ways the world over. And for me, given the unique context of Newham, and what I mean by unique is, as with other local authorities, the political construct is always different. And in the London Borough of Newham, largely it has been one principal political party that has led the municipality and the council, and that's a party that I'm a member of and represent through my leadership as the Mayor of Newham. But if there is a growing and enduring and embedded sense that residents don't have voice or aren't heard or are engaged with from a position of privilege, entitlement and hierarchy, which is underpinned by the paternalistic view around the role of authority and people, then that's a political and democratic problem. And I would say that the principles, methods, practice and participatory democracy are very fundamental to the future efficacy of democracy in this country. And I think there's a lot for the political establishment, including the agencies that operate within the political establishment in this country, both at local and national level, that need to be learning from what has been emerging the world over and what has been seeded by the likes of Georgia and her leadership role here at the London Borough of Camden, over in Newham, but also elsewhere, because resident popular voice is really important in shaping how we understand our neighbourhoods, being lived by our residents, but also it helps enhance residents' understanding of the challenges that local authority and leaders within a local authority face in trying to meet all the demands in the face of the significant pressures. And also, in addition to that, just by way of conclusion, it's imperative that as we proceed in reimagining our neighbourhoods and our spaces and how they are used by our people, not least because of the diversity that Georgia mentioned, we have to ensure that our residents are involved in understanding what that means and what that has to represent for them, given their enduring lived experience in those places.
Yes, briefly, because I've already had my say already. But, I think that what's important here to understand how important partnership is. How do you want to imagine a world in which you do policy without people? It doesn't make any sense, does it? So I think, Newham and Camden have been involved in partnership with us in building this academy, in doing a number of very important experiments, you could say. So an experiment is something that has to be driven by civil action itself. You can't experiment on people without them being involved in that. But everybody knows that we're facing times of extreme challenge and uncertainty, so we don't know the answers to it. When local authorities went into the COVID situation all over the world, they didn't know what they should do. They had to find a way of working with people quickly, actively, to change the way they could deliver services that were suddenly needed. And in that situation, that partnership already has to be there. If it's not there, you can't drive things forward. And both Councillor Gould and Mayor Fiaz are involved in building those partnerships, which will take through sustainability. And you heard from Solomon and Kipkeo, and so we've been in partnership with the local authorities in those 5 counties in Kenya in exactly the same way, driving exactly the same change. We do exactly the same thing in Lebanon, you'll hear that later. We had a fantastic event in Lebanon recently opened by the governor of Beirut, who was asked himself to fix those notes and what did he think was the good life for Beirut. And then we tested him against other people. So it was quite good actually. There was a certain overlap, but not completely. But anyway, so I think it is, what is policy for? It's for people. So we have to drive that initiative. There has to be a kind of civic renewal. And not just here, but everywhere. That's the most extraordinary thing.
Glad you never tested us. Never had that one, so maybe it's coming.
Well, thank you for those answers. Speaking of partnerships, how do you think citizens, communities, universities and government can work together differently?
Well, I think that today is a really brilliant example of that work. So every time we've ever had a citizen-led process, the kind of collective imagination and activism of our citizens has brought ideas that we could never have thought of on our own. And Richard's presentation earlier brought that to life. I remember we did one on health. We thought the kind of biggest health issue would be something like obesity, but the thing that citizens said is that their number one health issue was social connectedness, and that is somewhere we would not have gone on our own as a council. So that kind of leadership of citizens takes us, I think, to the right solutions and the right kind of partnerships. It's also something that we can't solve on our own: social isolation and connectedness. Councils do not have all the levers, so we need to bring together our voluntary sector, our public sector partners, citizen leadership, universities to solve some of these challenges. And we, alongside working with IGP, we've also been working with the IIPP, another part of UCL, on missions and taking a missions-based approach and having kind of bold missions that galvanise our citizens and our institutions. So take one of our missions that everyone in Camden will have free, healthy, sustainable meals per day. That requires all of us to work together completely differently. It requires us to look at supply chains, big change. But that was set by our citizens, and solutions will be set by our citizens. And our job as local authorities, I think, is to bring that kind of convening power and bring together the huge institutions we have, like UCL, that have big procurement power, big employment power, spaces and the ability to influence some of these massive issues. So I think that the citizen voice and the kind of research we're doing here provides an anchor that we can all work towards, and we know when we're successful because citizens have given us measures through the Good Life Euston and now the wider Camden work to say, have we been successful each year? Are we making progress collectively on the things that citizens feel are most important?
I would say, interestingly, for me, as someone who's grown up in Newham, who has the privilege of occupying this position, who first and foremost recognises that my role is as a servant of the people to deliver on what I've promised. The collaboration enables me to progress with the disruption that I initiated in the council when I was elected in 2018, and it forces the organisation itself, which is in a similar vein to Camden, one of the largest local authorities in the country. We have a budget of £1.5 billion. The range of things is so broad and complex and challenging. It is easy for an entity like a local authority to become ossified in a particular way of thinking and practice, and the collaborations with community, with anchor partners, with higher education institutions helps me disrupt that, but more importantly and crucially, in the context of the multiple challenges that all municipalities and institutions such as Camden and Newham face, given the challenges globally of sustainability, of climate emergency, of living well, of happiness, of well-being, of how do we proceed in a way that doesn't lead to a deficit for the global south? How do we elevate these issues in a way that delivers on a promise to our residents, but also a contribution to the wider global community? So I think that's the most interesting and exciting element of this for me, because it helps sustain our future relevancy.
Well, diversity is what it's all about. You need diversity of perspective. You need to bring people together in new forms of collaboration. You need to create new ideas, and you need to turn those new ideas into new forms of action. And so why wouldn't you use your universities? I mean, they are the great institutions you have in a country, full of people who are inventing new things, coming up with new ideas. Right? You need to make sure that they're serving you properly. And that's really what this academy is about. It's about delivering that energy, that insight, whatever it is, and bringing it together with other people's energy and insight, and driving the kind of transformation you need to see. I certainly don't need to be louder, that's for sure. Not me anyway. But I think that is what is at the core of it. And I think when you work in silos, exactly as Suraya Miah just said, when you work in silos, what you're doing is cutting yourself off from opportunity, cutting yourself off from flexibility, from the ability to think differently. And that's what we all need to do. We need to think differently about the challenges, and we need to do it together. So that's what we three are doing. We're doing it together. And with lots of you in this room, and everywhere else again.
So that's perfect. Unfortunately, we have run out of time to take questions from the audience, but there is an interactive board just behind you over there where you can post some of your comments and any questions that you've got for the panellists, and a networking lunch as well, where we'll all be able to connect with each other and the citizen scientists represented before us. So that leaves me with a massive thank you to our guests for joining us, sharing insights on how citizen science can use to empower the residents in decisions that ultimately affect them. I'll now hand over to my colleague Gillian to discuss how citizen science influences policy and decision making.